So this is important. We have now gone, oh, we have a significant interaction. This translates to, okay, so the relationship between the amount of alcohol a person consumes and their attractiveness ratings seems to change depending on whether or not they're male or female. This is really, really important, because if the relationship between the amount of alcohol you've had and attractiveness depends on gender, then it might not actually make sense to average across gender and look at the main effect. Because, for example, let's say, I know this isn't true, we've already looked at the means, but just hypothetically, if attractiveness scores went up with alcohol for, say, females and went down for males, then if I averaged across that up and down for that main effect of pints, I'm actually not going to represent the data. And if I just grab this, I can draw this out. So let's say that this here is attractiveness. And then down the bottom we have 0 pints, 2 pints, and 4 pints. And then let's say for males it goes something, oh, that's not the right thing, is it? There we go. It goes sort of like there to there to there. So we kind of get this effect for males. But then for females, let's say it goes like this, right? If I was to take their average, I'm going to get something that looks like this. And sure, at 0 pints, so at this point here, that red line does kind of represent what's going on. The main effect does represent 0 pints. But at 2 pints, the main effect isn't close to either of them, and it just gets worse as the story goes on. So with an interaction, there is the chance that you'll have issues like this. This isn't always the case. For example, my interaction might actually look, let's try again, maybe a little bit like this for males, and then for females it might look more like this. In which case my main effect going through the middle, averaging across gender, my main effect for pints would look like this. Now, sure, in this case, we still do have a lot of distance between our gender lines and what the main effect would say. But generally speaking, we still have the same direction. So in which case, what we could be saying here is, well, sure, averaging across gender, as alcohol goes up, so does attractiveness. But for females, there is a stronger relationship than males. That's different to the other scenario, though, where males and females were going in totally opposite directions. So you really need to be careful about whether or not it makes sense to interpret main effects when you've got the presence of an interaction. And what some people would actually argue is, well, if you've got an interaction there, if you examine the interaction, then it will actually tell you about the main effects just by looking at the interaction. It will tell you if there is a consistent relationship between each of these IVs with the DV, or if it changes. That's kind of the point, right? So if you have a significant interaction, it's worth just looking at that first. If you don't have a significant interaction, go ahead and look at the main effects. Now, what we can do to get our head around what does this interaction look like is we can actually use what's called marginal means. So marginal means is just calculating those cell means in the middle. So we can get this using the margins command, and we go margins pints #sex. Now this is a post estimation, so what that means is this has to follow something like an ANOVA or a regression. Now we've already seen these means before. You can ignore these T's and P's. Don't even pay any attention to them whatsoever. They're simply asking, is each value different to 0, and that is a meaningless test for us. We're just looking at the marginal means. Now for us, we already know what these are. This isn't too interesting. But what we can do with this is then run another post estimation, and this has to follow the margins command. And this is margin's plot, and it produces a nice graph of the interaction. And so what we can see by looking at this is that males and females look like they have about the same level of attractiveness, males being a little bit higher at 0 and 2 pints, but then we see this drastic change where males drop off and then become lower than females. So this change, this crossing over, makes this interaction what we call disordermal. And disordermal interactions really make your main effects hard to interpret. So when you see disordermal interactions, when you see this crossing over, I would almost exclusively just focus on the interaction. I wouldn't even consider looking at the main effects. And I believe you guys are being guided towards just looking at your interaction when it's significant anyway. But this is an excellent example of where you have to just focus in on that interaction. Okay, so this is what we call a disordermal interaction, where our lines cross over. If our lines don't cross over, so for example, in this scenario, eventually, yes, they will cross over. If I keep on going down, they will eventually cross over. But that's not what I mean by disordermal interaction. The fact that the lines will eventually cross over is just the definition of an interaction. Our lines are not parallel. But a disordermal interaction is where, for your data, at some point your lines cross over. So here, this makes it disordermal. Not that eventually this will cross over. It is the actual crossing over within the range of your data. Cool. So now that we've looked at that interaction, we've gone, well, it looks like it's not so much as happening at 0 and 2 pints, but something for men is happening at 4 pints. It's almost like there's a critical threshold, and then they just start rating everyone on a much lower point of the scale. So we need to figure out whether or not that drop-off is significant. We'll look at that next time. For today, I just wanted to get you guys up to the point of running the ANOVA and interpreting that interaction. And if you noticed, once I saw that there was a significant interaction here, I didn't even interpret the main effect, p-values. I looked at this, I explored the interaction, and went, yep, let's just focus on that.